Live in a constant state of fear and misery. No, we aren't free anymore. Live in a constant state of fear and misery. No, we aren't no, we aren't no. Live in a constant state of fear and misery. No, we aren't free anymore.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to Block Digest 123 at block height 540,674 on today, Sunday, September 9th. I got that right? All right.
Yes.
First off, I apologize for my brain and my stammering and things like that. I'm still a wee bit jet lagged coming back from Europe, so there's probably going to be some pauses and awkward silences. But what's going on, Rick? What's going on, Jenny?
Oh, nothing, man. Just enjoying the weather over here, working the shoulder, trying to get back into the frame of things here in Bitcoin. But yeah, you were over there in Germany, lightning hack day, all that stuff. And how was it? You're still recovering, I know, but did you enjoy your time?
Oh yeah, I think I touched on it a little bit with like the mini show, but yeah, it was some really interesting ideas there, especially in a coin join workshop Adam Gibson did, and then just a lot of good app ideas, and one of which I think can really be generalized like away from the specific application it was being developed for like game tournaments. But aside from that, I was pretty much perma-drunk the entire trip, except like the last 2 days.
Yeah, it's always fun getting to hang out with fellow Bitcoiners, hence the meetup and everything. But how's it going, Janine? I know you got to hang out and party a little bit too. You doing all right?
Yeah, I did. And that's now a week ago, I think. And the only thing I've done recently is that I climbed an almost. Oh dear, what just happened? Sorry, something just opened. I climbed an almost mountain, and very nice view at the top, and there was a light pole lamp, and someone had written "fuck Trump" on it, which is funny because I'm in a country where none of the national languages are English.
That is the most pervasive meme in the world right now. It's something to do with Trump. But yeah, almost mountains are still fun.
That sounds kind of weird and obsessive. Yeah, I don't. Yeah, let's go to foreign countries and just write "fuck Trump" everywhere. That is a completely rational way to react to the political situation you don't improve on.
I mean, I didn't write it. I don't know who wrote it, so I don't know if it was someone coming to a foreign country. Although I have noticed that the people here, yeah, they're not so much into that because they actually have a rather decentralized system.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, people believe this and that, and I guess it's okay to be yelling obscenities at one another. I imagine it's probably some dude that left right after the 2016 election, arrived in Germany, walked up that almost mountain, and then said, "Fuck Trump," and started a new life.
All right, though. I guess it's a couple days late, but let's dive right into the Optech catch-up. So not really much going on this week. The 0.17 release candidate 2 is out. So I guess if you want to kind of tinker around with 17 and the new release, try to help find bugs or see how it's working, you can go ahead and do that. I know a few Optech breakdowns ago, we showed a little bit of the dashboard that they've been working on for network stats. Marcin Jakimic, I probably just butchered the shit out of his name, who actually developed the dashboard, has a blog post that he put out kind of going over all the different features and explaining a little bit about how to kind of plug that into your own node. and get a little more data and presentation out of it. So if you like playing with network metrics, that's something to look at. So another thing, I don't know if anybody's been following testnet a lot lately, but there's been somebody kind of screwing around with like a really weird application on it that's spamming the hell out of the network with very high fee levels. And it's been kind of causing a bit of an issue for people. And so I guess on the mailing list, this kind of sparked a discussion about potentially resetting the testnet. And for those who don't know, this is like pretty much the third testnet that we've had in the history of Bitcoin so far. It's been around since around 2012, but it's roughly over 1.5 million blocks and about 20 gigabytes of data on the hard drive at this point. So, I mean, just for the purposes of testing, I mean, that's getting to a kind of silly point. So they kind of want to reset it just for that. But also, part of the discussion is looking at maybe removing the proof of work aspect and potentially replacing that with just signing blocks instead of using proof of work on it. Anybody who's really used testnet for anything before is probably familiar with the fact that the hash rate pointed at it is very inconsistent and prone to swing around. So there are a lot of very long random delays in block production. And it just kind of makes it a little bit inconsistent in terms of testing applications. And then also, aside from solving that, it would pretty much give people the ability to test reaction and responses and ways to mitigate things like large chain reorganizations a lot easier, because instead of burning hash rate that's very rarely pointed there, it'd be just re-signing things, and it'd be a lot simpler to simulate situations like that for testing purposes. So I think for anybody who really tinkers on testnet with building things for a while, probably kind of excited about this, because this would address a lot of the really annoying issues in dealing with testnet. As well, Johnson Lau, he's a Chinese Bitcoin Core contributor who actually developed the entire SpoonNet proposal, which is kind of like a hard soft fork hybrid to increase the block size. And he's also consistently been doing a lot of research on hard forks in general, and just kind of features that would be very useful in the event that one actually happened, and just how to actually coordinate and pull one off safely without a chain split. And so for the most part, that's kind of where his attention has been concentrated as far as research. Put out a proposal for a SIG hash update. And so for just real quick, people who aren't familiar with that, there's pretty much like a flag that you can set for each signature in a transaction, that it just in real layman's terms, it pretty much dictates what parts of the transaction that you commit to. So you can do things like commit to the whole transaction, just a specific subset of inputs or a specific output. And this is pretty much used for like things like coin join, or like passing around a transaction with a lot of parties where you only care like that one specific payment is made out of it and things like that. And so he has on the mailing list in a rough BIP out right now to kind of improve this for a little bit of security reasons, and then some simpler functionality when dealing with things like SegWit. So this would pretty much be a soft fork, potentially, if this gains consensus and everybody kind of gets on the same page with it. But something to kind of look into if you guys feel like it. And then notable commits, pretty much the accounts feature from Bitcoin Core has been fully deprecated. A new RPC command or data field is being put into the get peer info, so that you can see the minimum relay fee of each peer that you're connected to. And then C Lightning has updated I believe, their RPC as far as fee rates, and kind of giving just a simple, urgent, normal, or slow, and the ability to set a specific fee rate when dealing with on-chain transactions. And so I guess it's pretty much it for Optech this last week. And that jet lag's kicking in.
It's like always, man. It's just awesome developments on Bitcoin, man. This resetting the test net, that seems to be like the bigger chunk of this. I mean, that I'm thinking about is just a lot of stuff goes on testnet, and resetting that makes a lot of sense. The proof of work halt, I guess that is good for just getting through a lot of game theory stuff as far as like signaling and checking all that stuff. But it does make me kind of just wonder, like, I mean, you can't just like reduce it to where you can't do that. So kind of stuck it there at a weird point. But I guess halting it wouldn't be much issue since it's all testnet. Just sort of figure out, just improve stuff really quickly, I guess, without worrying about hashing something out.
I mean, like there is the whole Indiana Jones meme where like the skeleton on the park bench waiting for blah blah blah, that very, very frequently is used with the caption "waiting for transaction to confirm on testnet," just because hash rate pretty much it's a very frequent situation where people literally go poke miners and go, "Can you point some hash rate at testnet for a minute because there's no blocks and I'm trying to test something," and that can be pretty annoying.
Imagine so. Well, yeah, that's a good move then. But I guess it's going to be a little bit before that takes place and they do reset the testnet, but it's in the works.
All right, and then I guess really the thing I'm mainly covering today, it's something, it's kind of old from like back in the end of July, but I thought it was kind of an interesting thing to look at in terms of academic analysis of Bitcoin, and just because it's a really weird analysis where there's a lot that's kind of, I think, pretty on point, but then some key things where it's just way off. And pretty much it's taking Alfred Hirschman's exit or voice paradigm. And for those who aren't familiar with it, it's kind of an analysis of, I guess, politics or human organizations, with the thesis that some kind of organization of humans doing something starts degrading or not providing the members of it with what they want out of it. It pretty much leaves the members with two fundamental choices: to either exit the organization or what have you, or try to use their voice to kind of correct things and stop the degradation of services or whatever people want out of it and put it back on course. And it's kind of a very common paradigm as far as looking at political systems or corporations, and it's really just a general purpose way of looking at how people can deal with some organization that isn't really giving them what they want out of it, and kind of taking this paradigm and trying to apply it to Bitcoin. And I thought it was pretty interesting because it's something I haven't really seen done before. But the first kind of distinction here is that there are a lot of cases in which it's not really as black and white as it would be in a lot of things like a government or a corporation or what have you, where it's a binary choice between exit or use voice. And like an instance would be a hard fork like Bitcoin Cash. I mean, for instance, like as a holder, you very much can use your voice to try to influence things on either chain. You can hold coins on both chains. You can sell on one and keep on the other. And it's not really a binary thing. And you can always kind of come back. Although in the case of just a user holding coins, that could really come at a cost depending on how the price works. But he pretty much breaks down the membership of people involved in Bitcoin into three constituent groups. And he points out that there's no very clear-cut case of what constitutes a stakeholder like there would be in a business. So he kind of distinguishes the miners, the users, and the developers, mostly looking at the users and miners as a stakeholder. And really the big fundamental thing that I think the gentleman who did this paper got wrong is looking at the causality in terms of interactions between users and holders. Because his point and stance in this is effectively that miners are the chief stakeholders, and that in the instance of a fork, it's the miners and what they choose to mine on that would fundamentally have the say in which chain is more valued. And so this flaw aside, he kind of goes through and looks at the options of exit and voice from each like separate group, and how those options can affect change and other things, and how it would affect the actual individual who's making a choice in this situation. And in the instance of a fork, you pretty much, I'm sure you all know, you have the hard fork, which inevitably causes a split and pretty much presents people with a choice, and a soft fork, which remains backwards compatible. And so he mostly looks at the instance of hard forks. And right here we can see he's talking about BIP9 and signaling. And I feel like the person who kind of pointed this essay out to me had a big problem with this section, but honestly, I think that this is pretty accurate. He looks at BIP9 signaling as effectively voting, but not in the sense that like we're signaling for this as a miner, so if we get enough votes, this is going to happen. He acknowledges that this is pretty much just a signal of intent, and that you can't really bind anybody to it just through the process of signaling, and looks at it as a coordination mechanism where miners are effectively looking at the users who give the actual coin value that the miners are being compensated in when mining, and tries to kind of guess or appease the users in terms of what they will signal to activate. And, you know, after hitting a point, they kind of hit that shift in coordination where things are clear and something will actually activate. But in the instance of a hard fork, I mean, it's a clear split, and you really have to make a choice as a miner. And this is kind of one of the first distinguishing characteristics between the groups that he points out. The choice between exit and voice is very different for a developer, a user, or a miner. And in the case of a miner, they can't kind of hedge their bets. Like you have to make a clear choice to choose to mine or support one chain or the other in the event of a split. You can't point your hash rate at two places at once. And so this also comes with another kind of flip side to it, is that miners have the least penalty in terms of cost for exiting a system. A miner, in terms of just their hash rate, can just simply shut it down. They can point it at one chain, and if that becomes uneconomical or loses support, they can switch back over to another. And the cost in doing so is very little in terms of the other groups. It's simply the loss of the profit in that time that they spent mining another chain. There's no requirement for a miner to dump coins that they've mined in the past on other chains. They simply are dealing with the here and the now in terms of their revenue. And so they can pretty much exit, but then re-enter with the lowest amount of cost in terms of actual material losses compared to the other groups. And so this kind of creates a dynamic where they're able to look at a situation and kind of make an immediate choice that might not wind up being the best choice in the long term, and simply re-enter the system that they've chosen to exit. And this can also be looked at not only as an exit, but also kind of an instance of using voice. By moving over to this other chain, they're presenting a much more, a much less noisy instance of voicing support for something. And this can kind of be used as a coordination mechanism to inform other people what's going on. And I think it's really interesting to kind of point out here that, like, as a miner, like, they really have, in terms of economic value, the least penalty in terms of exiting a system. And then to move on to users, like, it's like a lot more akin to kind of a normal political situation in terms of exercising voice. Like, we can communicate with each other openly, offer arguments that are based in reason and language, and try to convince people of things. But when it comes to exit, like, users are going to bear the worst costs here, because exit for a user effectively involves selling all of their coins. And if you wind up making the wrong choice in terms of exit, and the system that you've exited continues to appreciate rapidly in value, you are not going to get your initial investment back. You're going to take the fiat from when you sold and wind up with a much smaller portion of what you exited with. And so it's a lot more dangerous as a user to apply exit, which is generally looked at in this paradigm as the kind of final resort when voice isn't working. Because if you are misjudging the situation, you pretty much fuck yourself from an economic point of view. And this is part of the reason he kind of points out this dynamic from a user's point of view. Like, you can very much hedge your bets. Like, you don't have to make a binary choice like a miner does in terms of where to point their hash rate. You can leave things alone and hedge on both sides of a fork. You can exit the entire system in terms of both forks altogether. And it's kind of just a weird difference in terms of the cost analysis looking at a miner, in that, exiting and choosing wrong winds up being much more painful and damaging economically to a user versus a miner, which might seem kind of counterintuitive if you really look at the large capital cost involved in mining. I mean, I think most people's brains would just go to, like, exiting a system is going to hurt a miner a lot more than a user. And when you really break down the situation, that's just not true. And so this brings us to the last group, the developers, which, aside from the instances in which they're also users and holders, like, there's not really a lot of loss or gain in terms of, exit or voice. Like, a developer who wants to exercise their voice, it's pretty much just the normal development process. Like, you propose something, you gauge community support, you put it into code, and then you try to convince users to run it. And if you're successful in doing so, users will build up support. Miners will start running something and signal in whatever mechanism they use that they're preparing to upgrade for it. And the consensus equilibrium will slowly shift over to whatever you've done. But in terms of exiting a system, I mean, like I said, unless they're also a user holding coins, I mean, there's really no downside here. You just leave and go develop for something else. And if at any point in the future you change your mind, you decided that your choice to exit the system was fallacious or erroneous, you simply just come back. And I mean, aside from ego and butthurt feelings, I mean, that's, you just come back and you start contributing again, and you exercise your voice to try and convince users and miners that whatever change you want to introduce is worth introducing. And, I just thought this is really kind of an interesting paradigm to really look at the entire ecosystem. Like, it's like, again, there are some kind of logical fallacies, I think, here in a few specific instances, such as assuming miners moving to a specific chain or choosing one is going to inherently guarantee it wins. I think that completely ignores the causal relationship with users and the fact that if all the users simply upgrade to something, I mean, miners, you're either going to lose money and go out of business, or you're going to capitulate and do what the majority of users want. But I mean, aside from that error in this analysis, I think it's a really interesting way to look at the system, because it really breaks down the interplay between different components of it and the options that are available in terms of each group attempting to influence consensus, and how this really plays out in the long term. And so, like, I just kind of, I don't know, it might seem like I'm rambling, but I think I kind of shorthanded a lot of this. And I really would encourage everybody to actually like go read this essay. It's in the show notes, and just kind of like think over like the aspects of it that actually have some merit and insight to it, and kind of try to just ignore the few glaring errors in it and look past that, and just think about this as a way to really look at a system like Bitcoin and how it really works on a social level.
Yeah, I mean, this is from Stanford, and I think we might see some more papers like this coming out from other institutions that are trying to better understand Bitcoin and the networks and Nakamoto consensus and the way that it all works out. Because, yeah, I mean, we were there. The fight for SegWit was really kind of it was a long thing, and going all the way from the Hong Kong agreement to last year with the split of Bitcoin Cash, there was a lot to be learned as far as the way that this network reacts to certain certain individuals and the way that they choose to voice their opinion. And it's definitely important to look at now, just with all the stuff that, I mean, relevant news with Bitcoin. There's developments, lots of lightning stuff going on, but in Bitcoin Cash, like that whole network over there is they're facing these issues again. I mean, and it's a real problem. And I mean, like looking at this and the incentives and seeing somebody like Jahan, who is running a large mining organization, and like, yeah, he can point his hash rate here or there, but he also has some stake in both, which we're starting to realize is a lot. And another, it looks like he kind of picked the wrong horse on this one. But just as far as like the way that's going to play out, because that's going to be the next particle collision in Bitcoin forks and the way that they all play out. So it'll be interesting to keep this incentive structure and the way that it all works, and the way that these players have different voices in mind while observing this and letting it sort of play out. Because that there's probably going to be some capitulation and guys coming back over into Bitcoin, and I wonder how that's going to go.
Well, I mean, I just think it's really interesting, because I feel like a lot of people, even myself in some instances, it's just like a very simplistic like breakdown of like, this is anarchy, convince people or don't, like, end of story. And there's never really any deeper analysis of like how that whole process works. And I mean, the exit or leave paradigm is really a pretty old kind of way of looking at social systems, specifically political and economic systems. And I just think it's, again, glossing through like some of the errors in this essay and correcting those, I think it's a really valuable paradigm in looking at a system like this and really understanding the nuanced interplay between all the different parties involved in it and how it kind of plays out in arriving at maintaining and changing consensus on what exactly the rules of the system are at any given time.
Yeah, it's also just like, I found that if you can explain that whole paradigm in a way that, people can understand, it really captures people's interest, because it does sort of give a new dynamic to networks that we've never had before. And it's something that's revolutionary. And if you can, sort of show that this gives people a voice that they haven't had before, or, this helps them in the system, and the way that decisions are made, I think it really does hit home to some people that, oh, this thing can solve some problems that I wasn't even thinking about, because all I was thinking about was digital gold or something like that. So yeah, it's really something just good to have in the back of your head whenever you're trying to talk about Bitcoin to somebody that's relatively new, whenever you're trying to explain checks and balances and the way that Nakamoto consensus works. It's a great thing to have in your in your arsenal of information about Bitcoin, to be able to explain it to someone.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so I got a little long-winded, a little ranty. Let's give Janine her chance. Who is being an idiot this week, Janine?
Well, we keep making jokes about all the problems that Coinbase has either been the cause of or has been very closely related to the source of the problem. And it turns out that once again, I have found another instance where Coinbase is at fault. Yesterday, I finished a rather lengthy conversation with Brendan Eich, who is the CEO of Brave, which makes the Brave browser. Also the former, what was his position? Co-founder of Mozilla. And it began with me stating that KYC cannot be decentralized, and reminding him that non-custodial, that KYC cannot be decentralized for non-custodial. Yeah, messed up. Which began with me. Okay, so I said KYC cannot be decentralized, and I was reminding him that non-custodial services, as far as I'm aware, are not required to implement KYC for their users. And that conversation turned into a sort of mini investigation into the reasons why Brave users have, why they had high fees when the Bitcoin wallet was still running prior to the fall of 2017. And why that browser ultimately decided to very quietly sunset their Bitcoin wallet in 2017. And after a series of questions, Brendan made a distinction that I would call that they're semi-custodial Bitcoin implementation. I say semi-custodial because apparently it was not fully custodial, in that there was a key in the browser that the user had control of in a way. But obviously, I would not consider any wallet. One of the features of a non-custodial wallet is obviously that you can, make backups of keys. Like, if you cannot actually see the key, if you cannot access the key, even if it's in the browser, that doesn't mean that it's, under your control. That just means that, you're using a browser and the browser controls it. So whoever ultimately controls the browser does. But if you don't have an easy way, at least, like, sure, maybe you can reverse engineer the browser and get the key out, but that's not, I wouldn't consider that to be a non-custodial wallet for the majority of users if there's any degree of like shared authorization or access or whatever. So they had a BitGo wallet that is actually a multi-sig, which is very strange. It's actually stranger to me than having a custodial wallet for micropayments, because micropayment transactions are a lot larger by their very nature, because it's more signatures. And doing that for micropayments is a bit of a hazard, because if you're sending smaller amounts of Bitcoin, then obviously the fee has to be small enough to justify that transactions. And so if you have a larger than normal transaction size to begin with, just because of it being multi-sig, but you're sending a very small amount, you could run into problems if you're not being really efficient with how you're doing your transactions. So Brendan was claiming that rather than experiencing what I thought he has been saying all along, is that they had high fees on this BitGo wallet, and I thought the reason was because it was multi-sig. But he actually says that the high fees came from the fact that they gave users the option to refill their wallets by buying Bitcoin from an exchange with fiat, and that exchange charged them very high fees for buying those very small amounts of Bitcoin on an individual basis. It was never done as a bulk buy order. It was individual buy orders of $5-10, very small amounts compared to, probably the average was closer to at least $50 or $100 for most people, if not greater amounts for an exchange. So all of this time that he's been going on about how the Bitcoin network was horrible and the block size was too small, it's actually been the case that it was a gatekeeper issue and a poorly architected system of buy order request to an exchange. And what exchange were they using? Coinbase, which compounded the problem. Why? Because you may remember that towards the end of 2017 and the beginning of 2018, we reported on Coinbase's systemic coin management issues. If you don't remember that, you can refresh with the Medium post from David Harding, and I think his name is Hasu, who talk about, batching and stuff, and they mention Coinbase listed in the video's description. Basically, the TLDR is that they had a huge backlog of unconsolidated UTXOs and were not in the habit of batching transactions, which, if you know anything about how fee markets work, it artificially inflates fees, especially for people who are, in this case, buying below average amounts like $5. So instead of fixing this problem, Coinbase not only passed on the high fees onto their customers, the users and businesses or what have you, but they also passed on the blame for the high fees during the whole scaling debate to Bitcoin's developers and their inability to increase the block size. And by the time Coinbase, wizened up a little and got a little more humble and decided to consolidate their UTXOs, we were obviously already into 2018, which was way too late for Brave because they had already given up on using Bitcoin for several months, as I said, fall of 2017. So when he said that they had been using the Coinbase buy widget, I had an immediate aha moment, and all of that history clicked in my head. And I also kind of felt really stupid because I had completely forgotten that I'd actually tweeted about them using BitGo and Coinbase as part of a partnership in 2016, 2 years ago. And I had been asking about whether Coinbase's browser fingerprinting policies were in conflict with the Brave browser. Did not go into how they were using Coinbase or anything, but I completely forgot that I even knew that. And side note, at the time that Brave received VC funding from Pantera Capital, which specializes in, you guessed it, ICOs and digital currency group headed by Barry Silbert, who was leading what contentious Bitcoin fork in 2017 that promoted the narrative of too small block sizes? SegWit2x. And I remember, as Block Digest account said I think it was yesterday, we remember Barry Silbert by the Where's Barry memes because he kind of disappeared. So I then go to inform Brendan about these issues that Coinbase specifically had as an explanation for the issues, that it was not as much a Bitcoin problem as it was a gatekeeper problem. But unfortunately, the conversation kind of continued to sour, and he started accusing me of straw manning and gaslighting. Didn't seem to get any satisfaction out of the fact that, hey, we just figured out a major problem that you've been complaining about for over a year now. And instead, he just continued to say that I was blaming his users somehow, even though I literally had to state point blank that I didn't think it was the responsibility of users to design their Brave wallet or to decide on infrastructure partners or dependencies, and certainly not to batch Coinbase's transactions. He just kept saying that I was arguing fees were not a problem, even though I did think fees were a problem. But the way you address the problem of high fees is by recognizing that it is a symptom of a multitude of causes, not only block space optimization issues or lack thereof, but transaction complexity, size, timing, bad fee estimation algorithms and wallets, and the rent seeking of gatekeepers like Coinbase. And yeah, obviously another topic was their multi-sig, which I've said I think is overkill. He said that did not, the high fees were not from the multi-sig wallet. But either way, whoever sold Brave on the idea that a multi-sig made sense for a micropayments wallet is not their friend. Poke, Mike Belshi. His justification, Brendan's justification, was that it was lower budget and more user-friendly, which doesn't, I mean, maybe I'm missing something, but that doesn't seem to make sense to me either, because multi-sig introduces complexity and means that they had to rely on another key holder, in this case, an entire company, which was BitGo, for this setup to work. So users were not they had no independent control of their funds. If BitGo just disappeared, their funds were basically lost. Like, you needed to have, it was a 2 of 3 multi-sig one of the keys was deliberately destroyed, which meant that if the user or BitGo just disappeared, the funds were stuck, which, like, okay. And before our conversation actually even started, which was the reason why I decided to kind of end it, was because he made a disturbing analogy about fumigating cultist moths, which was in reference to Bitcoiners he had been arguing with recently, including Francis, I think his name is Poulet. I don't get French names pronunciation right. But for anyone who may not be familiar with the term fumigation, it's what you do when you are removing pests by suffocating or poisoning them with toxic gas. I'm under no impression at all that he was directing that specific comment at me, but I did feel kind of awkward when I saw it because I call myself Einzelgängermutter, which means it's German for rogue moth, and I use that imagery. So it's like, oh, I don't want to be a fumigated moth. Thank you. So yeah. In all, what did we learn here? Or rather, what should we have learned here? Crypto to fiat or fiat to crypto gateways are a problem in general. And after this conversation with Brendan, it seems like it was a deciding factor for them in dropping Bitcoin. But it's not a problem with Bitcoin. It's a problem with the massive overhead that custodial exchanges have when you deal with fiat. And he made the assumption in the conversation that because I, knew about how to mitigate the fee issues, that I must be an expert, and that he literally said I optimize my Bitcoin buys with fiat. Well, I have a secret for you, Brendan. I don't buy Bitcoin. I don't even use custodial KYC exchanges. So if you're asking me to recommend one, as he ended up doing, he was asking me for recommendations for like what vendor they should have used instead. Well, it's like, I don't know. There are none. I mean, Coinbase is the worst. You probably could have gone with any of the other exchanges and built, collaborated on building a widget, and they would have been better than Coinbase. But yeah, I'm actually surprised Coinbase didn't charge them more with this kind of system that they implemented, because going through the KYC verification process for those users who are just buying like $5 or $10 worth of Bitcoin a month and then immediately withdrawing it to obviously put it into the Brave wallet probably wasn't cost efficient for them, considering that they already had issues with coin management. But why over the past year has Brendan been blaming, fee gateway problems on the Bitcoin network? Like, high fees happen, but the sources of your issues here were Coinbase, Brendan, for the most part, from what I can see. And I'm still not sure whether it was even a productive conversation overall, but at least we got to find out that Coinbase is once again responsible for another massive fuck up and controversy.
All right. So what did we learn, boys and girls? Say it with me. Brendan Eich is a dumbass. But I mean, what else would you expect from the guy who created JavaScript? Oh, well.
Oh man, this was a big thing because just a few days ago I had my meetup, and we started this new thing of a round table, like what do y'all want to discuss? And one of the people there just immediately brought up the Brave browser and the BAT token. They were like, this thing's going nuts all over Twitter. It's like, oh yeah, what's the deal? They're like, oh, it's just crappily made. It's just like, what is going on with this process? And yeah, I mean, like to hear you lay it all out like that, it's just like, yeah, there's a lot of problems there. We brought up the Brave browser. You brought up the Brave browser and the BAT token a lot because, like it's one of those projects where I know like the Brave browser itself, something that people use, but, they just, we're set on using this token, and, then they try to implement this buy feature through Coinbase's widget. And it's just like, well, you just turned one problem into a bunch of problems, adding that into it. And yeah, and then just not understanding the system about fees and the way that all this works is just like it's pretty bad. Just like showing your ignorance to the field that you are so highly invested in, that you're running this browser and this token.
Well, I mean, it just like it comes down to arrogance and stupidity. I mean, and you see this time and time and time again with all of these shitcoin projects. Like, people have an idea for an application to build on Bitcoin, and then they realize that it's going to take time. There are things that need to be dealt with and built out before it's actually a usable application. Your average person can seamlessly interact with. And then they go, Bitcoin's broken, I'm going to go make a shit coin. And then they completely fuck up the entire project trying to just architect some Rube Goldberg machine to fucking put something in grandma's hands now. And then they just rationalize and come up with bullshit excuse after bullshit excuse after bullshit excuse as to why Bitcoin doesn't work, because they were just too impatient and wanted to fucking build something right now that they can fucking get rich off of because the crypto gold mine rush. And it's just the same fucking shit over and over again. Like everywhere you look in this space, people who deviate away from Bitcoin and wind up building some fucking utility token or some shitcoin project. It's the same formula over and over again. Impatience, greed leads to stupidity. I mean, it's like it's ridiculous at this point.
Yeah, I mean, I would say there's some ignorance in there, but like then there's like the ignorance of your own stupidity thing where you got to learn, and you got to learn that you're ignorant to this process. And so maybe that's where some of these guys are just like, yeah, it's a pretty costly lesson.
Yeah, and the thing that frustrates me is that he was like weirdly complimenting me in a way by saying, like, he was saying I was an expert and that I was really knowledgeable, but then at the same time he wanted software recommendations, but he didn't want to go through with me like what the misunderstanding was about what happened in 2017. Like anyone who wanted to discuss that with him, he was just calling them cultist moths or cultists in general. And it's like, I don't give people recommendations if I first don't understand what their problem is and how have they previously tried to fix the problem or misunderstood the problem. Because if you don't do that first before doing the recommendation, they'll probably just use the recommendation in a poor way, repeat the same mistakes again, and then we'll have this conversation again in 2 years. Like, I don't want to do that. So I'm not going to give him free software advice when he, like, even though he thinks I'm knowledgeable, without apparently not willing to listen about what I understand about what happened in 2017 and why they even dropped Bitcoin in the first place. Like, would love to go over that. I don't know what the issue is, but there a lot going on there.
I think that's right where the arrogance shows up, right? It's like, damn you showing me my ignorance on the subject matter. I'm pretty, sure I'm right about this. So, but you seem pretty smart about it. Like, I'd like to hear about it, but I'm still pretty mad at myself. And I think I got this figured out. It's a weird thing trying to capitulate and understand Bitcoin. It takes a while. And I guess a lot of these people, they still don't understand the fundamentals about the way it works. And they're off running these pretty big projects.
I mean, it's just the same shit over and over. And like, Janine, I seriously have to applaud your patience. I looked at that thread and I pretty much just called him an idiot and then fucking walked away. Like, I have zero patience with that kind of shit at this point. It's just so intellectually dishonest and manipulative and clearly motivated by greed. Like, I'm just sick of it.
Yeah, so, well, I mean, my strategy with this kind of thing is that even if I get mad about that, if I have the feeling that there's something to be learned and I wouldn't be able to learn it without basically being super nice about it, then I'm not going to apply your strategy, because then we never would have found out that actually the Coinbase and not their wallet, the fees with Coinbase and not their wallet was the main problem, which is really telling. Like, I don't know, like, I haven't actually looked whether anyone else has pointed it out to them that Coinbase was the source of their issue. Like, I may not even be the first person, but I have a feeling that I am, because it's continued for this long that he's complained about it and he still keeps complaining about it. And I haven't seen anyone else point out that Coinbase was the issue. I haven't seen the connection. So glad that happened, because now we know that Coinbase is the problem. It's always Coinbase.
Patience is a virtue, except when Shinobi's impatient.
Yeah, we need Janine's patience because, yeah, it does pay off in dividends there where you learn a little bit more of the story.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Speaking of, learning more about stories, I guess we could go into this Goldman story. I know that we covered, or you guys, in the last episode on that point 0.5 episode, you guys talked about Goldman putting their plans in crypto on the back burner. But it looks like someone spoke too soon. It was widely reported, but only sourced from Business Insider as someone, quote, according to people familiar with the matter. This story drummed up some controversy on Twitter, but I think mainly that was the market searching for an answer for the price. I think you might be right whenever you were saying in that last episode that there might be some regulations coming forward in the background. And I'll get back into that. But so the day after that news broke about Goldman walking back on their plans with crypto, the following day, the CFO of Goldman, Martin Chavez, spoke at a TechCrunch Disrupt conference in San Francisco, saying it was, quote, fake news. He continued to push back, saying, quote, clients want this, and when discussing their derivatives for Bitcoin. And while it could have caused some confusion, right now Goldman is clearing these CME and CBOE futures contracts, which they started back in May, but are also working on their own derivative called a non-deliverable forward that could be sold over the counter. And I think that Martin Chavez was saying that this confusion could have come from just because there wasn't clear timing on it as far as like how this was all going to be pushed out. But saying, quote, maybe someone was thinking our activities here and got very excited that we would be making markets as principal and physical Bitcoin. And as they got into it, they realized part of the evolution, but it's not here yet. And I think we all knew this. Like when we covered this story, it was back on Block Digest episode 95. I went through there, and it's about the hour and 2 minute mark. We knew it wasn't based in physical Bitcoin, and we covered that pretty extensively, how it was going to be similar to the Bitcoin futures markets, and it wasn't going to be physically backed Bitcoin, but that was somewhere that they intended to go. And let's see, Chavez reiterated that the Goldman's position on physical Bitcoin, saying, quote, physical Bitcoin is something tremendously interesting and tremendously challenging from the perspective of custody. We don't yet see an institutional grade custodial solution for Bitcoin. We are interested in having that exist, and it's a long road. And since this news came out back in May, it was stated that Goldman would like to buy and sell Bitcoin at their trading desk, but it was also mentioned back then that the same problem with the custodial, the way that we got to get the custodial efforts figured out as far as who's going to be owning this, who's going to hold the keys, and how's that all going to play out. And so getting back to the speculation of the regulations in the background, I think it is possible that there was a real source for this story from Goldman. However, someone more high up, like the Goldman CFO there, sort of knocked down that assumption, because it just feels like a Goldman Sachs is pretty powerful industry leader. And it's hard to imagine there's not somebody in there real close to these regulators. And we see these headlines get pushed out and then they get walked back. And that seems like that's the way that the feeler for the regulations comes out, is someone says something and then they wait for the pushback to see how exactly this works. But at the same time, I also feel like people were just searching everywhere for a reason for why the price started going up and then fell back down. And, maybe somebody from Goldman just made a statement about this to try and give some reason to the market. But I mean, there really could be some background regulation stuff going on, not just from this story, this next story, and also the story that y'all covered with Shapeshift and their KYC connections coming up. And just feels like there is something going on there with regulations. But as far as Goldman's plans to walk back their crypto trading desk and working with their non-deliverable forward, their Bitcoin derivative, those plans are still they're still going. It's just going to take some time before we figure out the custodial side of things to where they could actually, buy and sell Bitcoin and hold that and have the keys and, be a brokerage for Bitcoin. I mean, that's something that is a ways away. Like he's saying, it's a long road. And maybe there was a group of people that were listening to this Goldman news and jumped on the bandwagon. And then as soon as they realized it was going to move slower, they jumped off. But I think you're right about there's some regulation stuff going on in the background. And I know that these headlines, they kind of test that. So, yeah, they just walked that back and over this past week. And thought we would do a little catch up on that.
I mean, looking at this, like, because, it's, well, when me and Janine did the little short episode, I tried to dig around and do like as much research as I could, but it was really like I was pretty much bumming around a hostel and barely there like almost every day, so I didn't really have a chance to dig as deep into stuff as I usually do. But this just makes a lot more sense than like completely shelving the trading desk plan long term and still working on a custodial solution. Like this seems more like order of operations. Like, working on a non-deliverable future, you don't have to worry about the custodial aspect, while then working out like how to actually manage cold storage for something like that and progress towards actual physical deliverable Bitcoin, like after dealing with the custodial solution. Like this just makes a lot more sense, because it was kind of confusing to me, like why they would shelve the trading desk but still be working on a custodial solution. Because I mean, really, they're kind of bound by the same kind of regulations and responsibilities that any legacy institution would be who got engaged with these kinds of products. And I mean, outside of the legacy financial world, most crypto businesses, they have custodial solutions. Like you have companies like BitGo and Coinbase that actually have a big deal of experience in this. And it was just kind of weird, like looking at that and thinking about who would use a custodial solution from Goldman Sachs aside from other legacy institutions. Like the people in the crypto space would be looking to experienced crypto companies to provide a solution like that, not somebody like Goldman Sachs.
Yeah, it's definitely one of those things where whenever I started digging into it, looking back at this source, it's like, yeah, it just like a bunch of people drummed up, varying reports based off of this one source. And yeah, for sure, they're definitely still planning on keeping their trading desk. And like you're saying, I mean, it is an order of operation thing. Development's slow. These guys, they're trying to do it the right way. I imagine Goldman Sachs, they, got some guys that understand the system, and they want to do it this right way. It's going to take time. It's going to take a little bit of, work and development to get the cold storage all correct to where, they could actually, start doing physical Bitcoin buy and sell. And for right now, it's just a non-deliverable forward, which that's the way we reported it. That's why I don't quite understand the big confusion there, other than just like somebody searching for a reason for the price to fall. Because I was doing that myself. I mean, like when the price was falling, I was like, there's got to be some reason for this. And I started looking around, and I don't even think this news had popped up yet. But I think that could be it too. But going into another story here that's also cited from a quote unquote, according to people familiar with the matter, from Business Insider. So like again, just based on the headline and the people and the source and everything, I mean, there could be some real meat to the story, but at the same time, like it could be walked back. This could also have to do with some background regulation stuff. But so Coinbase, they also have been working with BlackRock's blockchain working group and discussions about setting up their own Bitcoin ETF, or Bitcoin altcoin ETF, that is. So this news, wouldn't really surprise me if it's true, considering Coinbase tries to spread their hands everywhere in the space. And this move also wouldn't be too crazy, considering Gemini has been one of the biggest proponents of a Bitcoin ETF, and Coinbase might want to attempt something similar to stay competitive. So but Conbase being Conbase, they're setting their ETF up similar to their index fund, which is tracking multiple currencies and not just Bitcoin. But BlackRock's working group also advised Goldman and ICE on setting up their Bitcoin trading desk and the Bitcoin derivative we just discussed. So, if they are really in these discussions with BlackRock, and, it wouldn't really surprise me if they are, trying to set up some ETF. But I don't really want to give the story too much credence because, like we were saying, it's the same source from the Goldman story, which has been walked back. But I guess, as Coinbase is putting some extra work to try and remain in the conversation with the rest of Wall Street moving forward in Bitcoin, because, Silicon Valley, their streets are covered in a bloodbath of shit coins. And, it's looks like it's going to continue to get worse. And, Coinbase, they're just trying to hold on to their bags and get as much profit as possible to their ultimate goal of a altcoin Bitcoin future. And the way that all shakes out, I don't know. But supposedly Coinbase is seeking some advice from BlackRock to set up their own ETF. But I was going over the story and I was just thinking about it, like, I saw while I was researching this story, I saw something about Binance possibly IPOing, and it just got me thinking, like, how come this exchange doesn't just try an IPO, and then you would basically be selling shares of an exchange on Wall Street? It wouldn't be an ETF, it would be shares of the company, and then that share would be related to cold storage and all that way that Coinbase handles that stuff. But I guess really it's like all that stuff isn't really figured out. If they do want to get this ETF off the ground and get it moving, this altcoin Bitcoin ETF idea, I almost wish they would just get it off the ground and get it moving, so whoever's going to lose their value could lose it and we can get moving forward. Because I don't see, these ETFs, man, they just starting to get me. I got to avoid these ETF stories because they're really starting to bug me a little bit.
I just don't know, what the hell Coinbase is thinking. All of the ETFs so far have been shot down due to concerns over market structure in general. How the fuck do they think adding a little basket of shit coins on the side is going to appease the SEC or alleviate any of those concerns? Bitcoin is the most massive liquid market in this space, and the SEC keeps giving bullshit excuses about concerns over market manipulation. How would adding less liquid, smaller markets into an ETF basket alleviate those concerns? It would make them worse if there is any kind of logic at all to what the SEC is doing, aside from just trying to play gatekeeper.
Because they just want to pump their bags.
That's what I was thinking, honestly. It's just like they've got a lot of, I imagine, the whole Jahan Bitmain Bcash thing surprised me. And I don't want to sort of be up for another surprise. I wouldn't be surprised if Coinbase is doing a lot of stuff with Bitcoin Cash and these altcoins to the level of, they got their bags they want to pump, but also they want to remain relevant, because now ETFs, these is the headlines. It's like, I'm getting sick of ETF headlines. And Wall Street, they're coming in with their ICE and their Goldman Sachs. It's like Coinbase is just trying to stay relevant over there in Silicon Valley. They're like, hey, we're doing an ETF too, we promise.
I think they know very well that, all of the shit coins are not going to, improve their case. there is like a precedent where just even saying like there's a rumor that it could possibly happen is enough to like increase the price on some of these things. Not working very well at the moment. Everything is going down. But the one thing that really surprises me with like this whole Goldman Sachs thing, and any bank that is saying that they want to get into like, offer Bitcoin trading, whatever services for institutional investors, it's, I don't know if it's, maybe they have been doing this. I'm just about to reveal their massive plot, but it's almost like, if the banks had just gotten a clue way earlier, they should have just gone directly to these mining companies like Bitmain at the very like years and years ago and said, "Oh, so you need to pay for this electricity. So you do need to sell some of your Bitcoin. How about you give that to us and we'll establish a little stash." And then in the back of their mind that their plan is to like, massively sell it on the market, or at least, make some money by, holding it for a while and then trickling it out to, exchanges who then sell it to customers. Like, why did they not do that? If they wanted to get, if they wanted to like get a hand on Bitcoin so that they would have some control, that it wouldn't get out of hand and that they would lose their own power, why did they, their best bet was actually to just go to the miners and buy the Bitcoin off of them to get a supply? Or is
Yeah.
that a bad theory?
No,
I
it's
think
not
it's
a bad
because
theory.
they're idiots.
I mean, like, it's very possible that they were doing that early on to try and get a stakehold in the system. But I really think that something that we should, how we're looking back like that. We just did that story on Stanford. You covered that, Shinobi, at the beginning of the show, looking back at SegWit's implementation and the way that different people have different voices in the system. There is like this absence of one that maybe didn't come up because it didn't play a part in the implementation of SegWit, is economic nodes and their ability to control headlines and the way that they can do stuff with that. I mean, like, because it does feel like that's something that we're still battling and will be battling for a long while. But that's something where, yeah, just like in the whole framework of all this stuff, I mean, these people do have the ability to just like, pay some people, get some headlines out, and make some moves to try and further their position. But it's just a headache of stuff over there with Conbase and Coinbase, and causing headaches for Brave and Bat. And I mean, like, honestly, just them and getting involved with an ETF, it's just too much at this point. Like, I'm starting to really get this like I don't know, this sickness of these institutions. Just like, yeah, their bad practices are made their way into these exchanges, and it's getting to this level where I'm just like, ugh. I'm just like, almost, I'm glad that we have that Conbase like image. I have it saved just to where, because they come up so much, I just throw them up there, because yeah, it'd be hard trying to come up with something new for them every time. This is getting old, Conbase.
And it's kind of funny because, Coinbase is one of the exchanges that has put an effort into hiring actual regulators and people from government. So they're probably like, shit, our investment in all of these people who are like, supposed to help us with this whole revolving door thing, it's not working.
Yeah, it's a nightmare.
Ooh. All right, though. Let's do a topic hop. So
Let's do it.
real quick thing we didn't touch on in this short episode out of time, but Casa, Jameson Lopp's new company, is doing a Lightning node hardware wallet, and I think this could potentially be interesting. I mean, it looks like mostly what they're kind of pitching this as is a key management solution, given that their core business model is key management for high net worth individuals with hardware modules and, the multi-sig setup that they have going on. Sorry again, that's the jet lag again. But I'm kind of interested to see a little more details come out about this, over the next week or so as to how exactly they're doing the key management for Lightning. Because to my understanding, this is pretty much, this looks just like a Raspberry Pi with a very solid hard drive setup and a software stack with a nice user interface over this. And just, a good control panel to run an actual Bitcoin node with the Lightning node on top and have everything synced on top of a full node with the nice, dashboard that your average person can tinker with and understand things. But I'm mostly interested in how they're going to be doing key management. Like, is this pretty much just going to be building on a software setup? Because in that case, you might roll your eyes and think it's just a Raspberry Pi, but this is a pretty open and old chipset. And I will remind everybody with Spectre and Meltdown, I think aside from the newest Raspberry Pi, they were all pretty much safe from the Spectre and the Meltdown exploit. So for the most part, this is, on a spectrum, one of the more secure chipsets out there as far as widely used CPUs. Or if they're going to be going more in a direction of developing their own hardware module to potentially manage keys for this. But, it's kind of sparse on details, but, just at a glance, it is nice to see people really rolling out little plug and play devices to allow an actual node to be ran by your average person, not just an endpoint on a smartphone for spending and such, but something you could actually use to keep a well-connected node for routing and trying to make some kind of passive income. But I hope we'll get a little more details about the key management sometime in the near future, and we can actually look at that, because I think that they would probably be able to come up with some nice solutions there on that front, being one of the, I would say, chief problems of running an actual routing node right now.
Yeah, man, like at the meetup, this was another one of those topics somebody brought up where, and I was excited to talk about it too, because, Lightning development is going to be fast, and it's one of these things where, we need these plug and play devices, and hopefully, like you're saying, we can get the key management and everything right, because, there's real development going on with Lightning Network and transactions and daily payments and at different businesses. And so, the quicker that some of these businesses could set up a node to where they're running their transactions through their own node or someone that they trust and know, this just helps speed up development. Like Casa is probably, one of my go-to guys out there as far as like in just these different companies. Like Casa, I really like the way that they're doing things. I talked to one of their guys at our meetups, and it seems like security is paramount there. So hopefully, like you're saying, everything will be done in the green there with key management.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, because it's like, if you just really think through like how the key management issue plays out, I mean, in like meat space at like an actual physical store, I mean, it really wouldn't be that big of a deal to just have a hardware wallet hooked up somewhere and have somebody manually press a button to like have the payment go through on the receiver side. I mean, it's you're there in the shop, they scan the QR code or whatever, and you just check it and manually confirm it. I mean, it's not that big of a deal. It's not much different than pressing a button on a point of sale to open the cash drawer. But as far as like something like internet commerce, like that's a whole nother issue, because that's going to be on 24/7. It's not the same kind of dynamic as a physical shop where you have a clerk who's constantly there whenever somebody's making a payment. And you're going to want to be able to have a secure key setup and not just have something online constantly exposed. And then the same thing kind of goes for people running nodes just for routing. I mean, until we have like a nice, simple plug and play solution for your average person. It's probably going to just be the more technical people running routing nodes who can actually like lock down and secure a system to a decent degree on their own without having to go read some Medium post explaining stuff or follow some guide. And like it's those two things, like internet commerce, to allow just a normal person to use Lightning Network for some kind of internet business, and the routing nodes so that your average person can just take some of their Bitcoin and plop them into a bunch of channels for routing and just passively collect a little bit of income on that. And it's those two things I think that are really going to have, like, they're the more make or break than a physical shop. Like, I don't think we're going to see real widespread adoption of Lightning in meat space for a while, just like we're not seeing widespread adoption of Bitcoin in general in meat space. It's going to be those internet applications that I think would really catch on more, and we really need some kind of key management solution for that.
Yeah, man, I don't know. I mean, like, I think Lightning development could take off lightning fast, man. If we get this thing set up right. I mean, here in Colorado, I know there's a lot of incentive to get off of this banking infrastructure with the cannabis market. And, you know, like you're saying, it takes some technically competent guys and technically competent owners that, you know, want to get the thing running. And I mean, like, if there was an easy way to, like, you know, just like kind of plug and play for other people to, you know, it could jump off really quick. But yeah, that's all meat space. I mean, the internet's a different side of things. But you know, just as far as economic activity on Bitcoin, I think it could take off quickly.
Mm-hmm.
I'm actually surprised how fast the hardware side of things has developed, because like November last year, we didn't even have mainnet Lightning yet, and people were saying it's going to take so long for it to come. And now we do have mainnet, and we already have hardware devices specifically for this. So I'm really surprised by that. I would also just would like to personally implore Jameson Lopp to, you know, continue with this work and not waste his time at bullshit conferences like Decentralized 2018, which has people that do not even belong in this.
Waifu.
Suzanne Temple. No.
Yeah, I'm regretting the story ordering right now. I think I'm going to
Fix it up.
Yeah, I'm going to do that because I think this is a nice segue from this topic. But one thing I think that would really kind of help with this key management solution, apparently Alex Bosworth and Pieter Woolley are kind of thinking through this problem, but I hope most of you are familiar with the partially signed Bitcoin transaction standard. It's BIP 174, if I remember correctly. It's actually part of why the cold card kind of took a little bit longer than expected so that they could actually support this. But it was a BIP to kind of standardize a format for passing around partially signed transactions between different kinds of software so that you had a lot more interoperability as far as things like multi-sigs or complex scripts being passed around between multiple parties so they can actually sign it. And apparently Alex and Pieter have been kind of thinking about extending this BIP to apply to HTLC contracts because, you know, they don't just involve the signatures. You have to deal with the hash lock preimage and the actual, okay, brain, come on. The hash lock hash and then the hash lock preimage. And so both of them have kind of been thinking about standardizing them in a similar way to signatures and inputs or outputs with the BIP 174 standard, where you would just kind of have like a standard structure in passing them around, where you would have the preimage hash, which would kind of function in the BIP 174 standard the same way that a pub key or a path to a key in an HD wallet is. And then you would treat the revealed preimage kind of like a partial signature mapping to that. and just kind of be able to pass this HTLC around between different pieces of software and have them kind of be able to recognize, like, okay, here's a hash lock hash. I can look at this, see if I have the pre-image. Okay, am I in a state right now where I should be revealing this? And then just kind of plug the actual pre-image into that field. And then after passing it around, condense it into a final serialized script stack that could be broadcast to the network. And it's, I'm really happy to see this kind of thinking going on, and I hope this materializes relatively quickly. It's not any consensus thing. It's just a software standard like the BIP 174 itself. But this would make it a lot simpler to kind of just pass around the transactions involved in a channel state between different software and have everybody kind of on the same page as far as standardization, so that we don't have stupid issues like this wallet's not able to just pass this over to that wallet and make interacting with things more complicated. And that would help kind of standardize ways that you could plug and play potentially Lightning into existing hardware wallets, or have a standard that would make special purpose Lightning wallets a little easier to develop. So a little good news on that front.
Yeah, man. Like, sorry, I just like discussing time and everything and how many stories we got left, man. It's a busy day catching up from a Euro trip.
Well, this is what happens when jackasses like Shinobi Monkey run away to Europe on short notice.
Everybody got to run away at some point, but yeah, we got to run away with these stories, man. So I'm going to try to keep my comments to a minimum.
All right, well, here's a quick one. Jihan Wu's whining that SBI in Japan threatened to attack Bcash. SBI, listen to Jihan himself. Just do it. Fuck your mother if you want fuck. Just do it. Just do
Please,
it.
SBI.
Okay, that's a story.
I know that one was meant to be quick, but since it's our title, I actually have a question. Is this whole thing about boycott Nike, is that really because they use Colin Kaepernick in one of their advertisements, or is that a joke? I really don't understand.
Yeah, I guess
really?
so.
They're boycotting a shoe company because they used a guy who kneeled on a field?
Well, there's like...
What?
I don't know.
Welcome to America.
People are crazy, but like there is some... I don't know. Yeah, like, because I was wondering, like, why is everybody talking about burning their Nike shoes and throwing their Nikes out the door? And I look around and I'm like, what is this all about? Oh, it's because Colin Kaepernick doesn't like police brutality and doesn't want to, support that, or because the NFL has got some in cahoots deal with the military and advertisement, and Nike doesn't have deals with the NFL, so it's kind of like they're bashing the NFL while they're also kind of like taking a stance that they think could sell them more shoes, which they probably will.
Yeah, I mean, look, come on. Oh my God, anyone who gets outraged because someone does not stand for, the ritualized chanting is just like, oh my God, I have so much to tell you about what I did not do throughout my life.
I don't really care. I buy cheap fucking counterfeit $20 Chuck Taylors at a swap meet anyway. I fuck Nike. Crash, keep going.
Thrift Vans.
I mean, I think I could name other reasons why I wouldn't buy Nike shoes, but actually, if it was any other shoe company, this would make me want to buy the shoes. Like, good on them for doing that. Really?
Honestly, right? Like, I was thinking, like, okay, they're standing up against police brutality. Like why is that such a bad thing? I don't know, but yeah, we probably should slide.
I'm gonna castigate both of you. You bring up the schedule, and then you start talking about the most irrelevant story that we have.
Let's kind of crazy.
Let's all take a knee and move on. All of us.
All right. Quick update from Japan side. The Financial Services Agency is creating additional guidelines for new crypto exchanges after the CoinCheck hack. And pretty much it's not a lot of clear details, but the gist of it, if you want to go in here and click this link in this article, most of the details are in that one and not the one in the show notes. But they've quadrupled roughly the number of questions in the applications that a exchange applying for a license has to answer. And one of the big changes that they actually materially went into is you're actually going to have to provide meeting minutes for all of the meetings leading up to and involved in the application process for inspection by the FSA. And the reasoning being they want to make sure that the board members of any applicant for an exchange license is actually having enough discussion and really thinking through a lot of the security and financial issues involved with running an exchange to be able to responsibly manage such a business, so that like to kind of give them a basis to ensure that people are actually thinking through the security issues and the regulatory compliance issues and aren't kind of just trying to slide into the space and kind of play fly by night, just figure shit out as we go. And so, I mean, honestly, I don't really know how I feel about this, because it's on one side, it does seem pretty invasive in terms of an application process for a business. But on the other side, I do kind of understand where the FSA is coming from in trying to have some basis to look at how seriously and how deeply the operators of a company are thinking through the operational issues in a way. Like it's not like you can just kind of forge meeting minutes and make it look like you're actually really thinking these issues through in a serious way, because in order to forge those minutes, you actually have to think things through in a serious way to have all of those contents when you submit things. And so it kind of feels a little invasive for me personally as an American, but I can kind of appreciate the logic of like why they instituted that requirement and where they're coming from. It's not something you can kind of just bullshit your way through in an application process.
Yeah, I mean, like, just Japan taking the lead there in regulations and everything. It seems like.
Mm-hmm. All right. Punching bag time. There's a punching bag. Let's hit the punching bag. All right, I'm gonna go rapid fire on this one. Brain. Sonny King. He's a pseudonymous developer who actually developed Purecoin, the first proof of stake cryptocurrency out there. Apparently has an idea for a new kind of proof of stake spinoff. I think he calls it the supernode proof of stake. And I'm going to rattle through this because I have a lot of decent thoughts on this, I think. But it's pretty much based in hardware, which is really the kind of huge irony that, proof of work based on ASICs and special purpose hardware is kind of the polar opposite of something like proof of stake. But it seems like the developer of the first proof of stake coin is literally moving back to special purpose hardware in order to try and make proof of stake work. But there's not a lot of details, but I think based on what there is in this article, I can speculate a little bit about two potential designs that this could actually wind up being. The first of which obviously would be some kind of special purpose key management device, potentially also suited to be parsing the consensus data like blocks to validate things faster for signing. But this, I think, would introduce like that as a barrier of entry to any staker whatsoever. And each staker would have to have one of these devices to manage their keys and stake on the network. Although it would give each staker a much higher degree of control or certainty over their keys, assuming that they actually trust the hardware. But he made a comment about pooled staking, which is kind of something that a lot of proof of stake advocates haven't really liked the idea of, because it would effectively involve giving control of your coins or your keys to some central entity who would then stake on your behalf. And if this is the case, then I would imagine that the special purpose hardware would pretty much involve some kind of key setup where you maintain the keys for your coins, and then kind of on the network itself approve a key managed by the device to actually be staking and signing off on blocks. But the thing with this is I'm kind of confused about how this would work in terms of security, because the two ways I thought might make sense to kind of implement something like that is that you would sign off on the device's key with your keys that actually maintain the coins, which would then be included in the network's block, and then kind of allow that device's key to stake on your behalf for your amount until you kind of undo that with like another data structure that would make its way into a block on the network. But the problem with that is you would kind of have to rely on some other staking device besides the one that you delegated your coins to in order to guarantee that the negation of your delegating things to the original device that you engaged in a relationship with would, like, you wouldn't be able to guarantee that you could kind of undelegate your coins and that would get into a chain through the actual staking device you established a relationship with, because it's in their interest to just like, no, you if there's no kind of time limit, you've just delegated your coins to this device. Why would this device include something in the blockchain of this network that would undelegate your coins and thereby degrade its influence? And then the other way I thought that this could potentially work is you would temporarily delegate things in kind of a time lock fashion, where you could delegate your coins to a staking device and then have an expiry time on it. And then that way, they would be able to kind of act maliciously, potentially for the length of that time lock. But if a staker or a manager of a staking device did act maliciously, then you could simply choose not to redelegate your coins to them. And after the time locks of everybody whose coins they have had delegated to them expires, then they would slowly lose their influence and eventually not be able to persist in being a malicious actor on the network. But I mean, it's kind of an interesting thing to think about, but ultimately I think it just kind of goes to show how silly proof of stake is, because you've taken versus proof of work the attack vector from millions and millions of dollars of physical hardware that require physical housing and actually physically stealing or seizing control of to hijack and repurpose for malicious intent, down to the key management, which is now kind of circling back to we need special purpose hardware to guarantee the security of the key management, because if you compromise those keys, you're fucked and the whole network falls apart. And it's just really kind of silly circular logic on my part. But okay, done on that one. I kept it as short as I could. Dun dun dun.
Proof of, yeah, man, it's a confusing subject.
I just want to troll IOTA right now because I saw a thing where it said they're relying on delegated proof of work because apparently proof of work is too hard for them because they don't do a lot of work. They mostly just spend their time trolling other people, including actual cryptographers. Yeah.
Yeah, that's the next troll. Delegated proof of work. Let's see how long that troll lasts.
All right, slide along. You try to keep these short, but I don't know how many of these can really get condensed. So, all right, Bcash had its stress test, which me and Janine kind of lightly touched on in the last half episode. And we were kind of laughing about how it knocked 15% of the nodes offline despite only having one block that was 20 something megabytes, and most of them only being a few megabytes big and never actually hitting the 32 megabyte cap. Well, Greg Maxwell figured out why. Bitcoin ABC never changed the relay limits for transactions on the peer-to-peer network from Bitcoin, and it pretty much relaying transactions around the network was limited to around 7 to 14 transactions a second. So it was literally impossible for enough transactions to propagate around the network and get to a miner to allow them to build a 32 megabyte block. So not only did they not actually hit the capacity limit that they screamed they need, not only did it knock 15% of the nodes offline in the process, but they're not even familiar enough with all of the different architecture and variables implemented in their software to realize that it literally would have mathematically been impossible for transactions to propagate fast enough for them to make a 32 megabyte block.
Yeah, it's just funny because, I love that the point was brought up, because when I'm reading articles where journalists, especially financial journalists, are making these estimates about how many transactions per second Bitcoin can do, they're like, oh, it can do 5 or it can do 3 or something. Like, they make up all these numbers. They have no justification for how they got that number. And it's like, you can look directly in the code. There's a rate limit, like right there. Look. So, yeah.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I mean, just kind of harps back to that brave bat story of just like running off with your own ignorance and not really understanding it, and maybe some value loss is needed in order to actually learn something.
Yeah, it might have also helped them to actually understand the code that they were forking before they forked it. Maybe they would have changed their course of action.
Yeah, maybe.
All right. We have how many? 4 stories left.
I think we're doing pretty good on time now.
Okay, I'm gonna burn through this one really quick. Update, because next one I actually kind of want to talk about. So Bitmain activated over Asicboost on Antpool, and this article is really a shit article because they don't even differentiate between covert and overt Asicboost and try to paint this as if it's them getting caught doing covert Asicboost again. But that's incompetent writers. But really the only detail I really cared about in this is I was wondering if potentially they started violating patent law and implemented overt Asicboost in their own hardware, or were just doing this to allow people who'd bought how long miners to use overt Asicboost. And based on the Asicboost stance website, which has kind of been tracking the number of blocks producing overt Asicboost headers, it looks like they are just doing this to allow how long to mine at, or how long equipment to mine at their pool. There hasn't really been any serious deviation from the percentage of the network doing this, so it doesn't look like this involves in any way any more hardware equipped for overt Asicboost being brought online. And so yeah, blah blah blah. Okay, so Jack Dorsey, Twitter, Congress,
all the buzz.
Yeah. So this article is pretty much just bringing up the fact he made a comment about looking at blockchain technology in terms of solving some of Twitter's problems. And, honestly, I'm sure a lot of people are reading into that as blockchain buzzwords, but I'm going to go out on a limb here and look at Square's adoption and Square Cash, his investment in Lightning Network. I don't think he's the type of idiot who is just going to go blockchain crazy. He seems like he really gets Bitcoin and gets this space. So I'm gonna give him the benefit of the doubt and assume that he's talking about some kind of blockchain-based identity solution. And to really look at this, I mean, there are a lot of ways with Merkle proofs that you can architect something like that in a scalable way. Like, for instance, yeah, I do have to say Civic, aside from the scammy, pointless token, is a pretty decent architecture, and it's roughly in line with a lot of the things that the Microsoft identity project are kind of working on. But it could potentially help a little bit, but I think ultimately it's not going to really solve the problem, because you still need some kind of initial verification to act as a spam blocker. Otherwise, like, you could just generate a shit ton of disconnected blockchain IDs, and it wouldn't really solve any of the bot problems. Like, there still needs to be some initial gateway where you do something, provide something like a phone number or something that's not easily siblable to actually get a blockchain identity, and then use that from that point onward. But mostly I wanted to talk about kind of just more the general criticisms in the hearing. I haven't finished watching all of it, but I watched through a decent amount of it. And it really seems to me like, taking Jack at his word in this hearing, a lot of the issues going on with Twitter in terms of shadow banning, accounts being blocked out and shut down. I mean, obviously ignoring cases like Alex Jones or big name figures. I mean, those pretty clearly to me seem to have involved some kind of human decision making. But a lot of the less famous accounts, it really just seems to me like this is just kind of the same issue that a lot of social media platforms are facing, and it's the consequences of using AI and deep learning coming home to roost. Like, the artificial intelligence as a technology right now is not that smart. It's outside of very, very narrow things. It's not smart to any serious degree. It's not very advanced, and depending on how you actually train it and the data sets involved in that, it's very prone to error. And it seems like a decent amount of these kinds of problems on social media just seem like a result of trying to apply technologies like that way too widely while they're way too error prone, and it just kind of coming back to bite them in the ass. Like, these technologies just aren't at the point where they're capable of really filtering and analyzing complex things like human behavior and coming at a contextually appropriate response, to enforce something like a site's terms of service.
I'm really disappointed that Jack didn't, pretend to smoke weed in front of, that panel and then disappear in a cloud, leave the room in a cloud of vapor like Elon Musk. I was looking forward to that because, you just mentioned AI and that thing and just triggered me because I thought of that.
No, I was thinking about it too. He talks about
he inhaled a little tiny bit. Okay, you can see most of the cloud come out, and then the little bit get pulled back.
That's why I said pretend to smoke.
No, he did smoke. He just didn't inhale a giant lungful that would have had him coughing his balls off on camera.
I'm pretty sure Blake said it was pretend smoking. So I'm just really disappointed that Jack didn't say identity on the blockchain.
Yeah, his I don't know how many people caught the Joe Rogan Elon Musk interview, but that was pretty interesting to hear him talk about social networks, his AI, and there's like an end goal to all this, and I think you're right about they're just trying to implement it where it's not that smart, and it's taken out a lot of people, and it's I don't know how I feel about it. It's one of those things where it's it's censorship. It's not government censorship. It's the government getting corporations to impose censorship, but the censorship is also possibly going to be self-regulated. I don't know. It's a weird mechanism becoming a moth to a butterfly, and we're somewhere in between and all that. So it's hard to really say this is a good thing.
I think conscious like censorship or filtering is some component of it, but I don't like I don't think that's all of it. Like I do think that just AI algorithms just being very bad at what they're doing is a much larger component of these problems than just conscious like censorship. Like it's like you know what I mean? Like this is something that has been a huge problem for years in major companies trying to apply AI to automate like problem solving in situations like this. And I think it's reactionary and it's overreaching to blame all of it on conscious censorship. I think it's not being rational and actually looking at the situation for what it really is. Like it's some component, but it's not the overarching explanation for everything.
Well, according to Elon Musk, social media is an extension, or it's a simulation, it's a projection of our limbic system. So, what does censorship say about the state of our limbic systems? Is it unconscious? What's the word? Unconscious self-suppression or something. I don't know. Using AI for censorship, unconscious. I can't think of the word. Inhibition, unconscious inhibition. Yes.
Inhibitions? Well, look, I'll say this. It's not working for us right because, yeah, we're Americans and like we're supposed to have but I mean, like, think about censorship in China. Like, they think it's working great. And I mean, like, that's just the way it works over there is like there's censorship and it's doing its job for the people that are over there censoring. So it's like it's a weird situation with us and, yeah, rights and everything. But yeah, I think I meant earlier a caterpillar to a butterfly, not a moth to a butterfly. A moth doesn't turn into a butterfly.
My question is, with the reaction that we saw to Elon Musk kind of smoking weed, how the hell did the vaping congressman get elected? That's my question I would like to have answered.
There is a vaping congressman? I'm sure there is.
Yes,
but
there is a congressman who is actually he was one of the people that I think it was related to Trump, or it might have been a separate trial, but something about he had misappropriated campaign funds through Steam, and he was, or not Steam, Steam, yeah, and he was blaming it on his kid, but it was probably him, and he was called the vaping congressman because he used to vape in session or something. So I'm surprised that he got elected if this is how people react to Elon Musk kind of smoking.
Congressman, I don't put too much, I hold my hat on him too high. But Elon, as far as that hit goes, yeah, he hit it very lightly, and that's the way you're supposed to do it, Shinobi. Just hit it lightly and put it down.
Mm-hmm. All right, though, moving along. Grayscale has brought Zen coin into their investment trust basket. It's some really stupid shit coin that's supposed to be privacy centered with other dumb features like storage and messaging built into it. It's fucking stupid. It's pretty much like they went from Zcash, they skipped over Z Classic, and then they went to this Zen coin thing. It's yeah. This is a really stupid story, and Barry, you like hold on, let me switch over to the screen share. This right here, this should be Barry's reason for hiding again for like another 6 months, because this is embarrassing. This is ridiculously embarrassing. News coming this AM. Stay tuned. We got another shit coin you can invest in through our investment trust. Like seriously, like that. You need to build that up with a random tweet, and it's embarrassing.
I mean, consider Shinobi that this is the same guy who was silent on Twitter for like 2 or 3 months when he realized the Segwit 2x stuff was collapsing, and then his first tweet coming back was, "Hey, we're doing Ethereum Classic. Join us."
Mm-hmm. It's really embarrassing. But yeah, I don't think there's anything left on this story except make fun of Barry more. So you guys want to get it out of your system before you get to the last story?
Well, I ended up getting my handle was stuck in a thread between a bunch of people that I didn't want to talk to, and then Barry Silbert came in because apparently he's the Robert Frost of Ethereum Classic. I have no idea what that means, but I just reminded, hey, this is how we thought of you, which was the where's Barry memes. So he is probably aware of those now, unless he has the Block Digest account blocked.
And Barry, those where's Barry memes ain't going nowhere until I see you actually stand up and like take a position again and like actually get into this and not just pump my bags. You're always going to be where's Barry until I actually see you in some real discussion.
Mm-hmm. All right, so last story of the day, and I think we might actually make the time. So there were some rumors going around that Kraken had a massive security breach and were firing hundreds of people and shutting down an entire office in Canada in response to this massive security breach. And it turned out to be a bunch of nonsense. So Jesse Powell actually directly reached out to sorry about that. The website started screaming sound in my ear. But Jesse Powell directly reached out to Bloomberg to cover this. And pretty much the reality of the situation is they laid off 57 employees. And I mean, this really doesn't shock me that much. You know, Kraken, after the bull run over the last holiday season, went on an insane hiring spree. And overall market volume has been going down. The price is down to like a quarter of the all-time high. And I mean, it's pretty much just them cutting back a little bit on the customer support staff, which given the overall conditions in the market, it makes perfect sense at this time. Like they went through a huge hiring frenzy to kind of get prepared for the next bull run, and it's not really coming lickety split. And so it's not really cost effective as a business to keep all of these people on. And so they just let some of them go. And somebody somewhere decided to drum up a huge nonsense FUD rumor about massive security breaches and an entire office shutting down in response to it. And it's really a Bitcoin pastime. We have a sudden drop in price, and all of a sudden people start making up bullshit left and right. And so we had it happen with Goldman, and we had it happen with Kraken. I guess let's see what else it happens with before we start bounding around up again.
Yeah, when you see the price drop, just wait for the headlines because they're coming.
Mm-hmm. All right, so my brain is really feeling that jet lag block right now. But I guess if no one else has any input on this one, then I guess that rounds off the stories for the day.
Yeah, I'll just say real quick that nobody likes layoffs. So I can imagine it being a little bit upsetting and everything, and people, wanting to just quickly find an answer as to why am I not hired anymore? So I can understand people jumping to whatever conclusion there was, but it does make sense when you look at the market.
Mm-hmm. I mean, mostly I'm just curious whether it was like an actual employee who got let go or it was just somebody trying to find some excuse for market FUD. Maybe they were short or trying to get, a decent buy-in at a low level, but whatever. Another day in Bitcoin. All right, so
Yeah,
Rick,
man.
I think you wanted us to watch this historic moment together on the screen.
Yeah, let's just watch it real quick.
All right, let me get my mic switched over to the audio for everybody at home.
How does that work? Do people get upset at you if you do certain things? There's tobacco and marijuana in there. That's all it is. The combination of tobacco.
His little shoulder shrug of like, yeah, it's good. I love it, man.
I've actually, I don't know if it's fake or not, but I saw someone already made a mural of him, that face where it's kind of like, meh, like really arched eyebrows and stuff. Someone already made a mural on a wall of him.
Golly, man. Like, honestly, I've been hearing some people chit chat back and forth about it and like how it was, you know, how Elon said this and said that. But yeah, I mean, like, honestly, yeah, I think he just needs to hit that a couple more times and just chill out, man. Because, you know, this AI thing, I don't know. It sounds like he's got him a little too down. He needs to just break away from that. And yeah.
All right, Janine, these are a lot of thoughts. Start working through them. Let's go.
Yeah, I'll try to go really quick. So the first one is actually a fact check thing that I don't. Well, we haven't had a show since it was up, so it wouldn't have come up. But basically, there was a rumor going around about Ross or coins connected to DPRK, aka Ross Ulbricht, or at least accused Ross Ulbricht, that they were moving, and that was proof that there was more than one DPRK. Wait, why am I saying DPRK? I'm getting North Korea.
Dread Pirate Roberts.
Dread Pirate Roberts. I'm just gonna say Dread Pirate Roberts so I don't mess up that acronym again. But yeah, so there was a rumor that Dread Pirate Roberts coins were moving, but actually, according to WizSec, who actually did a lot of analysis on Mt. Gox and what happened to the coins and how they were hacked, they said it was not actually related to Silk Road. So unfortunately, that was not proof of multiple Dread Pirate Roberts, although I do think that was still a probability, but just a fact check. The second one definitely sounds like a good thing to check out in the coming weeks, but apparently Aaron Verdum is going to be doing basically comparisons of so-called privacy coins and whether they actually live up to, their claims. And he started off with Dash. It was pretty good. I'm actually thinking of maybe reaching out to him to collaborate on the BAT token, because that's even though it's not a coin, it's marketed as like a privacy token. So maybe he could help me out with debunking that one. And the second,
the TLDR there, I like that. The TLDR.
Yeah, TLDR. Yeah. The third one is a bit more serious. Basically, since August 20th, Arjen has been missing. The last time he was seen was somewhere in Norway. It's possible because he was a very avid hiker that he might have, gone on a hike somewhere in Norway and gotten lost. And the main reason that people kind of sounded the alarm about him being missing was because he missed a meeting, and it wasn't abnormal for him to go, offline for long periods of time, but they thought there was something going on because he missed a meeting, and they said that was out of character for him to like just disappear and miss meetings. So if anyone is in Denmark, Germany, Norway, or the Netherlands, or just in general, if you would like to help out in finding him, there's like kind of a search effort going on. I think the police in Norway and I think the Netherlands, not quite sure, but the police are actually involved now, and there's people going to, look at locations where he was last seen and stuff. So just be aware of that and help out if you can.
Definitely something, there was a hiker lost here recently, and I know that somebody went out there with a drone and filmed a bunch of footage of the area and then outsourced the video. I mean, they still didn't find the hiker, but there's new things going on like that. So yeah, if you're in the area, somebody with a drone, I'm sure people are trying their search efforts as much as possible. Just yeah, good luck in that search.
Yeah. And the last one I will keep very short and sweet, even though I have a lot more feelings and thoughts about it. But do not take security advice from someone who has not had that advice peer reviewed. It does not have a verifiable track record of giving sound advice. That is all. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Here, fucking
Agreed.
here.
Yep.
All right. So I guess that rounds us off for the day. It's good to get a full episode in again, and I promise I'm not going to run away to Europe for a while, guys. Okay.
What are your thoughts, Shinobi? Do you have a thought?
Berlin is weird yet awesome and fun, and I want a Turkish kebab right now, and I'm angry that there aren't stalls for them all over the place.
Oh man, does sound like a good time.
Mm-hmm. But I guess on that note, guys, it's been fun to get back in the groove of things, and I guess we will see you all Wednesday. Toodaloo.
Later, everyone.